Greetings viewer, Eric the Car Guy here, also known as ETCG1 on this here channel. How are you? I hope well. I've been talking an awful lot lately about what it is to be a technician and work as a technician and the kind of things that you deal with as far as how you get paid and just the work in general of what it's like to be a technician. But I'd like to take a step back in this video and maybe talk a little bit about what it's like to be a customer. Because many of you that watch my show aren't technicians, you're customers, and perhaps you're customers in the sense that, well, you might be fed up with wherever you're taking your car, because it seems like every time you take it in there, more money comes out of your pocket, and you're wondering if they're taking you or what have you. And I'm just going to try to just put out a couple of tips on how to be a quote-unquote good customer. And one of the first things that I can offer is to educate yourself. Have an idea, just a general idea of how your car works. I try to cover some of these things on my channel. I've got one on just generally taking apart an engine. I actually have a transmission back in the corner that I hope to take apart and do a similar thing with. But the idea is it doesn't necessarily have to come from me, this information, but it could come from any number of sources. I mean, you can find plenty of information online, that kind of thing. And the best thing that you can possibly do as an auto repair customer is be armed with information. And that's not just so that you don't get taken, it's just so that you have an understanding of what the problem is. Whether it's noise, whether it's a performance problem, something like that. It's very difficult a lot of times to understand. Maybe it's not explained to you well enough, or maybe you just aren't a car person. You just don't have that mentality. So it's difficult for your mind to wrap around like conceptual things, or just, you know, how that thing is loose. And that's kind of what I was trying to get into my last video as far as the technician side of things, is if you run into a situation where something might cost more in labor, or even just a job in general, just bringing your customer into that conversation and making them a part of that repair. So in other words, I always looked at it personally as like I was the extension of my customer. My customer's mind and pocketbook wanted me to implement their will upon their vehicle. That's just how I saw myself. That's how I saw my role, is I'm just the guy doing the work for you. But you have an understanding of what needs to be done, and then you elect what it is that you want to be done. Now, I spend a lot of time making recommendations to customers, and I try to put as much information behind those recommendations as possible. In other words, if you do this, then this will happen. If you don't do this, then this might happen. Because as a technician, it's almost impossible for us to convey to you exactly what will or what will not happen. In fact, one of the rules that I'll impart to you is be very hesitant about technicians who make a lot of declarative statements, like absolutely this and absolutely that. I know that they're trying to instill confidence, but I can say, at least in my experience, even sometimes the most simple and mundane repairs, even like something like an oil change can go wrong, and something can happen, and it just changes the whole tenor of the repair and your day in general. So just be aware of those things. And as far as when you're talking to a technician or a service writer, just ask questions, and don't be afraid to ask a lot of questions. And if you don't understand something, ask them to explain it, because in a way, it's up to us to justify our work and why we think you need a certain repair or a certain service to bring you into that. And that's why I like to, as much as possible, just bring customers in and show them what's broken or loose or worn out, or just as far as a service schedule goes, like this is what the manufacturer says we need to do at this given mileage. You know, just do whatever I can to try to bring you, the customer, into the fold. On your side of things, do whatever you can to learn about your vehicle and about what it requires. In fact, I've done a video on, it's called Free Money, I'll put a link in the description, about reading your owner's manual. One of the best things you can do as a customer is read through your owner's manual. In fact, I think I have one here. Here I have one for an Acura Vigor. And it contains a great deal of information, like your service history. Like if you're questioning, and even I just flipped through and found something about replacing a dome light. That's something you might get charged for if you went in to get your vehicle serviced. They might charge you more than just the price of the bulb to do that service. But it gives you plenty of information, and it comes with every vehicle. It should be in the glove box. You might have something used and maybe it's missing, but a lot of times it should be there. And don't be afraid to look through it, and don't be afraid to question whether or not you need that particular service. And you can find out that information because the manufacturer spent a lot of time, effort, and money to make this manual something that you could reference. Even better are service manuals. Now, I'm not saying as a customer you need to go out and start buying service manuals, but we've talked about those in other videos, and some of them are available online in PDF form, and they're much cheaper than buying the factory service manuals. And a lot of shops, I think, right now are going to electronic-based service manuals rather than sending out paper manuals to all the shops. It's just so much easier and cheaper just to do it all electronically and make it available to them that way. Plus, that makes it kind of proprietary on their part, to some degree. If you have that information, and the service manual, in my opinion, that was made by the engineers that made the vehicle. So I think there's really not much better out there. There's other manuals that are out there that you can get that are made by, let's call them aftermarket companies, your Chiltons, your Haynes manuals. They do a really good job of taking a vehicle apart and talking about the different services and just going through the different procedures and what have you. They have their own limitations as compared to the manufacturer. I mean, the manufacturer, they made the car or vehicle or whatever it is. So they ought to know it better than anybody else. They engineered the darn thing. They know what it's supposed to do. They've tested it. Hopefully they've tested it. And they've said that, okay, well, at this given mileage, we've seen this happen. So we've created a service schedule based on that. There you go. I think that's the number one thing that you can do as a customer is ask questions and educate yourself. And that I think is going to make you a lot happier about the repair, because the more that you're in the dark about your repairs, the less you're going to feel confident about those repairs or services that you may be getting. And that's something I think that if we worked on that as technicians and as customers, I think that auto repair would be a lot less painful. Yeah, sure, it's going to be expensive, but many times technicians have nothing to do with that. Many times it's, the part's only available from the dealer or something like that, and it's extremely expensive. Sometimes that happens, and that's just bad luck. And it's difficult with auto repair because it often comes at a time when you least can afford it. And maybe that's something else to think about is setting aside a little bit of money, like in your savings or what have you, for auto repair or for buying a better car. There's been several times where I've gotten a vehicle in and I look it over and say it's coming in for like a brake noise. Well, I look at the brake noise, I find out the suspension's all worn out, it's got massive oil leaks, it's got a leaking water pump, let's say. The power steering rack is leaking, it's got, like I said, a bunch of loose suspension parts, and just way more work than the car is worth. What I'll do, rather than trying to say, okay, $5,000, is I'll say, you know what, you might want to consider, just leaving this car behind and getting something else, because I can work on it all day long. I can replace all this stuff, and you can spend, good money over bad and continue to do so, but you're not going to end up with reliable transportation. And I find myself in that situation where I would say, you know what, I really shouldn't work on your car because there isn't really much there. So you also have to consider that. So be realistic about what you drive. I know that you may be in love with it, and it may be your baby, and you're sentimentally attached to it in some way, shape, or form. Fine, park it in the garage until one day you can restore it, and then get yourself something reliable, because a lot of that stuff comes down to safety issues. And when you're out there on the road, driving at 75 miles an hour, or okay, when you're out there on the road driving the speed limit, whatever that speed limit may be, at a high rate of speed, and you're next to me and that loose part lets go, and say I got my kids in the car or something like that, and we get into an accident and somebody gets hurt, the worst can happen in those situations. This is why many places impose inspections, just for this reason, to make sure that those vehicles that are out on the road are safe. Because you can have the safest vehicle in the world, but if the guy next to you doesn't, and something happens to that unsafe vehicle that affects you, well, So as technicians, or at least I know I feel a responsibility to that, to, if nothing else, look a vehicle over and say, okay, there's some safety concerns here that you need to address. And if you don't address these things, I don't know. I don't know what those consequences could be, but it's probably not going to be good. So be realistic about the vehicle you drive. Don't fall in love with it, and listen to that technician or that service writer. We've talked about the bad ones that are out there, and there are some bad ones that are out there. But if you educate yourself and you ask those questions, you might find yourself, basically rooting out a bad repair or a bad technician or a bad situation where you're being taken advantage of. So as a customer, you've got to do your part. I mean, as technicians, we've got to do our part also. But as a customer, I really think, and this is the other thing, if you're coming in to get your vehicle repaired or serviced or something like that, do your very best to try and document as much of that symptom or symptoms as you possibly can. I mean, give us as much information as you can. Write it down. Say, at this time of day, at this temperature, when the car reaches this temperature, when it's cold, it does this. When it's driving uphill, it does this. When it's driving downhill, it doesn't do this. Be as specific as possible. And that can be very beneficial to the technician and save them time. Because if you come in with just a general description, my car's making a noise. Okay, does it make a noise when the engine's running? Does it make a noise when you put it in gear? Does it make a noise when you step on the brakes? Any number of those things could help lead us to a diagnosis. So, give us the information that we need to help you. Remember, we are the thing, the tools, your tools to go out. You're spending your hard-earned money to basically employ us to go and perform a service or repair, or, what have you. So look at it that way. Look at yourself as an active participant in that repair. So don't just leave it all on us, and if it doesn't go well, blame us because you didn't describe the problem well enough. So give us as much information as possible. Educate yourself on your vehicle as much as possible. Read through your owner's manual. It's not a great read, for sure, but if you at least skim through it, you might come across some little bit of information that you didn't know before that could be of benefit to you. It could save you money. It could save you serious injury or worse. No joke, because let's face it, these are big, heavy things and they drive down the road at high rates of speed. Anything can happen. So let's do ourselves a favor and do what we can to stack the deck in our favor and know what's going on and have a working relationship with the people that are committing to the repairs on our vehicles. Well, I hope that information was helpful to you. You can always find me over at ericthecarguy.com if you have automotive questions. I ask that you type a couple of keywords into our search function, and if not, sign up for our forum. It's free. All you need is an email address, and ask your question over there in the service and repair section, and we will do our best to try and help you and get you some answers. Also, you can find me on Google+, Facebook, and Twitter. And I will close with be safe, have fun, and of course, stay dirty. And lastly, educate yourself. Communication. I think that's what's going to get you where you need to be. Till next time.